Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 113 of A Year of Change. Today we are going to do some prep work. So this one might run a little bit longer than it has throughout the week. Last week we did a change to our exercise. Basically went from mild to moderate. And so I want to keep that going for the next few weeks. It takes a long time to get used to that. It took us a while to get used to the tracking and then the eating and everything else. So I want to give this one a little bit more time. So at least for the next week, I want to keep you where you're at. Basically, what we did last week was just sort of start things off and get a rough idea as to what we should be looking for. We did the talk test, and you should be breaking a sweat after about 10 or 15 minutes. That'll give us a rough idea as to what we should be looking for. And probably by now, you've found what that is. Whether it's going for a walk or mowing your lawn or doing weightlifting things, whatever it is that you've decided to do, you've probably figured it out by now. So throughout this week, I want to stay with that and just have it so that we're, again, putting that into practice and getting that used to part of our, that's not even making sense, making that part of our daily routine or every 2 days sort of thing. But the main thing I want to do today is, the reason why I say sort of prep work, is we have talked a number of times about when we're going to start tweaking our food and looking at carbs and sugars and all the other good stuff. And we've been doing this now. This is the end of, well, the start, I guess, of week 17. We've gone 16 weeks now. Just sort of talking back and forth and getting used to things and starting everything off. And I figure it's long enough now that we should be able to set a proper date. I know I've been going, it's a few weeks down the road, and, this is way down the line, but we're almost halfway. Like, week 26 will be at our halfway point. So we've gone 16 weeks. We've been going about 4 months on this. We're a third of the way through the year. I think it's a good time to start preparing for actually doing our little tweaks. So there's a few things that we can do. And this is what I sort of want to use today for, is just to show you what to look for and how to go into your information on MyFitnessPal and find out where your weak points are. And if you're like me, you're going to have a few surprises there. There's on the MyFitnessPal page, if you go, once you log in, up at the top, you'll see where it says reports. What you want to do is click on there. Some of you may have already done this, but chances are, if you're like me, you've only gone and looked at your weight. And you can spread it out over like 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And for the weight, I think it's 180 days. You can go for a full 6 months. And generally what you'll find, especially at this stage, is that if you open that up for the whole 6 months, even though we've only been doing it for 4, you will see the trend of it going and slowly going down, which is good. So there are a number of different things that you can take a look at as well, like your calories, your net calories, which is basically your regular calories throughout the day, minus the exercise that you've been doing, things like that. But there are only going to be a few things I think that we should start out with for this, just to sort of get a sort of ease into things. Primarily we're going to be looking at one major thing, but these are the top 5 things that I think that we should probably be looking for. So aside from everything else, like you can look at trans fats and iron and all the other good stuff that you need, but the top 5 things I think we're going to be looking at would be protein, carbohydrates, fat, or sodium, fat, and sugar. Those will be the top 5, because those are things that we can easily control out of everything else. Trying to figure out your levels of fiber and your levels of manganese and everything else, that will come in time. But for right now, these are just sort of big, broad topics that I want to look at. So when you go up to your reports, and the reason why I'm doing this 3 weeks ahead of time, because it'll give us time to really get used to it, because it's almost like starting over and learning a new program, to go in and be able to see what the graphs look like and get an average out if you need it, and just see where your weak points are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you an example of what I've done with just these 5 categories. And this is over the past 90 days. So the very first few weeks aren't in there. But this is just from 90 days right up until yesterday. So right up until July 12th. No, July 11th. Today is the 12th, so right up until July 11th. And it'll give you all the information that you need. It's a little difficult to read at first because it's a bar graph, so it's a little difficult to sort of see trends. But there are a few things that sort of jump out. But with a little more digging, you can get a little bit more information from it. So we will start it with that because I figure if we do this now and take a couple of weeks to get used to it, I really want to start on the beginning of week 20, not cutting out, but start tracking one of those foods. Or food stuffs, or food components, probably a better word. I've been talking a long time about how I know that salt is going to be the rough thing for me. I've already started slowly, like, diminishing the amount of salt that I put on stuff, and in some cases I'm not adding any, just to try to get used to that, so that when I finally do need to do it, then it's not going to be as difficult. So I took a look at my sodium intake as well. I'm going to show you all 5 graphs actually, so you'll be able to see exactly what I've been putting in. But there were a few things that sort of jumped out as well. But I really sort of wanted to, well, I've been talking about the sodium because that's the one that stands out in the forefront for me. I don't eat a lot of like junk food, with like sugary junk food. I've cut way down on the amount of fat that I eat anyway. And those are sort of few and far between, primarily because I haven't eaten a whole lot of cheese. That's probably why. But I figure that it's a good way to start. I mean, for you, it might be something different. It might be sugar. It might be fat, whatever it is. You're welcome to start out with whatever you're working on. But I'm starting out with, I've been starting out with sodium because that's going to be the toughest thing for me. However, as you'll see, there were a few things that were a bit unexpected in my charts. So we'll start in, and then we'll sort of wrap things up that way. So first thing we're going to start out with is protein. So for the past 90 days, this is what my protein intake looks like. And it's not great. As you can see, I mean, I'm not getting as much as I need to. The big red line, by the way, you'll see that when you do your report. It's a little faint, so I made it a little bit brighter so that it stands out a little bit more for you. That is your recommended daily intake. Now, don't worry if your chart looks like this, because there are going to be days when you're going to go over. There are going to be days that you go under, and it's just sort of better just to get an overall idea as to how much you're getting in. So if every single day is above, like way above, then obviously you're eating too much. As you can see from mine, I am not getting enough. Overall, it's very low. So I think it's because not really by choice, but I don't eat a whole lot of meat. I eat a lot of eggs, and sometimes I'll have chicken and things like that, but they're very small portions because I tend to eat more like pasta and other stuff, non-meat things. So obviously I'm not getting enough protein. So that's going to be something that I can work on later on. When we're adding something, that is going to be a little farther down the road because I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult than taking things away. As odd as that sounds, trying to determine, okay, well, I need this much protein every day and things like that, it's a little more difficult to just say, okay, well, I just don't have to include sodium, which is a little easier. So when you're looking at this, you can tell that aside from a couple of high days, in general, my protein intake is fairly low. I'm not getting what I should be putting in there. So that's going to be something I'm going to need to actually look at as well. So the next one that we should look at would be carbohydrates. These are basically just simple sugars. It's really the best way to put it. We know like starchy foods have it, like bread and potatoes, pasta, things like that. So if you look at this, ta-da, there we go. The carbohydrates that I'm bringing in, it's not bad. On average, I'm under more than I'm over. So over the course of a year, I'm probably doing reasonably okay. So I'm not too concerned with that. There are a few high days in there, don't get me wrong. Those are things, obviously days when I've gone through pasta or lots of potatoes, or if there was a day that I can't remember what day it was. It's probably one of the spikes on there, where I ate really poorly all day, back in mid-May, I think. and I just had potato wedges all day. I just was really lazy. I didn't want to prepare anything. I stayed under my calorie goal, I think. I don't know. But, yeah, it's just all over the place. So, that was sort of the main thing that I looked at. It was, just spit all over the place. Classy. Overall, with this one, I'm under more than I'm over. So, I'm not too concerned with that yet. I know I'm going to need to regulate that as well. Because that's one thing, same thing with the protein, that spiking up and down is probably not good. I'd like to have it reasonably regulated, even if I'm still going over or under. I'd rather it look like a nice little wave instead of it just being all spiky and everything. So that's something that we're going to need to work on. The next one is I decided to sort of go in what I consider to be order of importance. So next one was the one that I thought was going to be a killer, was sodium. And this is what sort of surprised me. There isn't a lot, like I'm not over a tremendous amount. There is a huge spike, though. That one is in mid-May as well. And there, as you can see, obviously there are a couple of really big spikes that jump up. And so the good thing with that is that when you're in your chart, you can go into your, like whatever the spike is, you can find out the date. And you can go back and take a look at your diary and find out what you ate to actually cause that. For that day, and actually for the majority of the stuff that where I'm getting those spikes, they are, oddly enough, primarily meat products. Not real, regular packaged butchered meat, but things like cold cuts or pepperoni if I'm putting it on a pizza, or sausages. That great big spike in the middle, that's from mid-May as well. That was a day that I had 2 or 3 different kinds of cold cuts. So the sodium level in those was really high because they're cured meats, basically. So, of course, they have a tremendous amount of salt in them. A lot of the other spiky days are the days that we had pickles. We talked about that there's a tremendous amount of sodium in there. So it's not good. But at least I could go back in, I can take a look, and I look at it and say, okay, almost in every single instance, it's meat that's going in there. On that particular day that's really spiky, we should be getting around 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. I went over 9,000. Over 9,000! On that one day. So that will give you an idea how quickly that can spike up. But again, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was really convinced that it was going to be that high almost across the board. But it really isn't. And the days that are high are days that I've picked up like a frozen pizza or some other processed food. The regular food that I'm eating isn't actually causing me a whole lot of problems. So I thought that was kind of interesting to look at. The next one was another one that I thought it's going to be reasonable overall, and that is fat. So when you're looking at this one, primarily, I'm checking my little cheat sheet. That's why I'm going to look over there. Again, almost every single instance of this is from meat. I'm not bad-mouthing meat. I'm still going to eat it. But generally when I have that, I mean, it doesn't... Obviously, this is not really including chicken. The days that I have chicken is normal. These are the big spiky days that I'm looking at. And in almost every single instance, it's cold cuts or sausage or pepperoni or bacon, like something like that. Or ribs. Those are the really big spikes that you see. Those are rib days. So, I mean, overall, again, once in a while, we can indulge. It's not going to be that bad. But again, I'd rather have it fairly regulated. And then if I'm going to be going somewhere like to a friend's house for a barbecue or something, then that's fine to have one big spike. I shouldn't have as many spikes in there as I see. There are quite a few high days in there. But again, almost every single time it's because I'm having some sort of meat that's... And not because meat is bad, just that the meat I'm eating is high in fat. Like processed meats, cold cuts, things like that. Sausage, which are a killer for me because they're great. They're very high in fat because that's pretty much what they pack in with all the meat and everything else. There's all the little fiddly bits that they sort of cram in and make it delicious. So those are the things that are causing me to have the higher fat content. Overall, though, again, not too bad. Sorry. The next one is the one that really shocked the shit out of me. And that is my sugar. So, pop. As you can see, the sugar intake is way out of control. And this is what surprised the hell out of me. Because I don't really buy, like, I mean, I can understand a couple of weeks ago when I was doing, like, the chocolate-covered pretzels. I tried that, and I think of something else that I had, but I don't eat a lot of sugary things. So, of course, the first thing that went to my mind was coffee. That's where the problem lies. Because I'll go through 2 or 3 coffees a day, and I usually get 3 cream and 2 sugar. So I figured that's going to be the problem. So I started going into each day and trying to figure out, track, basically see where my weak points are, and it's not the coffee. The coffee is not great, obviously, but overall, it's very low. What's killing me on this one, believe it or not, is the fruit. There's a lot of sugar in the fruit that I choose. The apples, the grapes, pineapple, stuff like that. They are, I mean, obviously it's not as bad as like cupcakes or something, but because I've been eating so much fruit, then my sugar levels are really, really high. Now, from the 5 charts that we've looked at, that is the one that really, when you're looking at just the numbers, is saying that's the one I need to look at. That's the one I need to work on. That's the one I need to fix. But the way I'm looking at it is, since the sugar is coming from fruit, I mean, I can easily exchange the fruit for vegetables. That's going to alleviate that. But right now, the high sugars in there, although it's still very bad for me, is coming from a good place. And it doesn't really matter where the sugar is coming from. If it's too much, then it's too much overall. So there isn't really anything you can say, oh, yes, but it's a good sugar. It's not like it's a dry heat. It's still sugar. It's still bad. And that combined with the carbohydrates, which are simple sugars as well, obviously my sugar intake is much higher than it needs to be. So that's going to be something I'm going to be working on as well. However, right now, I don't feel that is, although it's the highest overall, I'm looking at it going, I'm still just working on the very basics, and I'm eating lots of fruit. I'd rather be getting high sugar from that fruit and still handle that sodium issue. So, getting back to the sodium, that's where I'm still going to focus my attention for this one. And I think probably what I'm going to end up doing is go take a look at the sodium first, then do the sugar, then work on the fat, then work on the carbs, and then work on protein. The protein and the carbs I think are probably going to be sort of at the same time, because I'm going to want to exchange the two and try to get them to a reasonable level. But for this, I still want to focus on the sodium, and the main reason why I'm looking at that is because although high sugar is not good for you, I'm still losing right now, and it's coming from a healthier place. So I'm still getting fiber, I'm still getting lots of vitamins, I'm still getting nutrients from it, so it's okay. Aside from the salt content, there's really nothing that's benefiting me from having high sodium. And although there are going to have days when, or I'm going to have days when it does spike if I end up buying more pickles, or if I figure, no, I'm going to have, this thing, which is a salty thing, that's going to spike every now and then. But overall, just the benefits to everything from your heart to your circulation and blood pressure, everything that way, I think the sodium is probably, for me anyway, the most important thing to look at right now. So I'm going to take the next 2 or 3 weeks, start looking at different ways of tweaking things, and then we'll start on week 20. So 3 weeks from now, we're going to start in on taking that stuff out. Now, if you want, what you can do is you can follow along with me and do your same charts, and regardless as to which one is the highest for you, you can either follow along with me with sodium, and we can start doing reduce the salt intake. Look for low sodium things that aren't going to taste bland, because that's not going to last. You always see that and say, oh, low sodium or no sodium, and then you taste it and you're like, that's because there's no taste to it. So again, we're going to be doing, where did that come from? Again, we're going to be doing some reasonable, practical things to lower our salt intake. exchanging things out for spices. We did a thing on spices a few weeks ago, so I'm going to start looking at those and see, where things go. That's another thing with my sodium chart. I haven't tracked a lot of the spices I use. I haven't tracked the salt at all. So although the food itself may not be that bad, I'm adding salt to all that as well. So my sodium levels are probably, add another that much to the chart up there where it's gone now. Anyway, add a big chunk on top of that just from the amount of salt that I would add on something, whether it's in the middle of cooking or after cooking, things like that. So that's where I want to focus. So you're more than welcome to join along with me. We're going to do the same thing, and especially for those of you out there that really like salty snacks and things like that, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough for me as well, but we need to do this. We need to get to a stage where not where we're eating all bland food that doesn't taste good, not where you're throwing away your salt shaker and never putting it on anything. It's just so that on the average, week by week and month by month, you look at it and say, no, on the average, I'm below where the recommended, or I'm close to the recommended intake. If you're a tiny bit above or a tiny bit below, that's okay. But for something like that, there's no way you're going to say, okay, well, I need to have 1 more milligram of sodium to reach today. We're going to go over, we're going to go under, and overall, it's going to be all over the place. But I think for right now anyway, we'll say month by month, we'll do an average, and then we can narrow it down even more week by week. I think at that stage, it's probably okay to say, okay, overall, we're doing well. So for the next 2 or 3 weeks, though, go up, take a look at the different charts that you have, figure out where you feel your weak points are. If your sugar intake is too high, then you might want to focus on that, or if your fat intake is too high, or if you feel that your sodium is still good, but you still want to follow along with us, then certainly follow along with what we are doing. That way you're not sort of going, oh, well, I'm doing the sugar thing, it's not the same. We are going to be addressing sugar, we're going to be addressing fat, and then I'm going to get to the carbohydrates and the protein. But oddly enough, how I look at it is protein and carbohydrates are the 2 things that you sort of need. Those are ones that go in their own little group. The sodium, fat, and the sugar are the bad things that we really need to regulate. Not necessarily, we need to make sure that we get enough, but we need to regulate those. So I've got those 3 sort of in my mind anyway in a separate compartment. So we'll take those 3 first. Those are the bad things. We're going to deal with those first. So let's start with salt. For those of you out there that are working on the sugar aspect of it, we will do that as well. You're welcome to do that on your own if you want, but it's probably going to be a little easier if you work with everybody and we're all doing the same thing at the same time. I don't want to leave anybody left out so that everyone's just going, oh, I'm working on sugar and no one else is doing this. We will be getting to that. We'll be doing the sugar, we'll be doing the fat, and then we'll start tweaking the other stuff as well. But one thing at a time. So for this, I really want to focus on the sodium aspect of it. And it's not going to be as bad as I thought it was going to be in regards to the food itself, because I don't buy a lot of processed foods. And every now and then, as you can see from, I'm going to put it back up there. Hey, there we go. So as you can see from, the various spikes that are in there, those are the days when I've had like cold cuts or sausage or pepperoni, because if you're buying a pizza, like a frozen pizza or something, you need to put more stuff on it because they never put enough on there. So it's just that addition to it. But in my head, I also know I put salt and pepper on everything. So that's not even including that. To give you an idea of how much salt, like sodium-wise, that we should be having in the run of a day, I think it's about half a teaspoon a day is the recommended intake, which we do need it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to cut out salt altogether, because your body does need it. We aren't freshwater animals, basically. That's why when you go to the hospital, they give you a saline solution. They don't give you just pure water. So we aren't going to be cutting it out entirely. We just need to get it down to a reasonable level. One where it's a little healthier, where we aren't running the risk of having a heart attack because we're putting salt in our pizza. Now, some of you might also think, because I did this at first, and I was like, what about iodine? Which is a weird thing to think of. But any table salt that you have will say iodized salt on it. And the main reason for that is because we do need iodine as well. So cutting that out, though, is not going to put you anywhere near a risk level for getting, having an iodine deficiency. So don't worry about it. I obviously use too much to begin with. So, but we're going to be getting the majority of what we need from different foods. And the healthier that you eat, the better it is for something like that. Obviously, if you're running into any issues with any of this stuff, go to your doctor. For God's sake, go to your doctor. That's what they're there for. They can go and look at all your stuff and say, okay, yes, you need to cut out sodium, or you need to cut out this, and you need to cut out that. Tell them what you're doing and say, here's my plan. I want to reduce my sodium intake, but I'm worried about having, a deficiency with iodine. What can I take to replace that? Here's the food I've been eating. Show them your diary. Show them what you're doing. Believe me, they're going to appreciate it. No matter what you've been doing, if you can go to them and say, here's what I've been doing for the past 4 months. It's very slow, but it's very steady. I am making progress, and here's what I'm looking at tweaking right now. If you have a printer, or even if you can save it as a picture, take your charts into them and say, here are my levels. This is accounting for this, this, and this, and I'm going to start on sodium and work on sugar. Get some help from them. If you can go to a dietitian, if any of you have that, go to them. Talk to them and see what alternatives they have. Something that isn't just going to say, okay, well, remember, you need to drink nothing but water and rice cakes. It's got to be something that's practical, something that you're going to be able to accomplish. For me, it's probably going to be mixing in things like more onion and more garlic, which still has sodium in it, but it's probably better than the salt. And just really tracking things a little more strictly. If you have a nutritionist, don't go to them because it's not a protected term. They aren't a real doctor. They are not a healthcare professional. Go to a dietitian, not a nutritionist. There, that's all I'm going to say about that, because we've already gone on this rant before. So, over the next 3 weeks anyway, I'm going to take that down. Over the next 3 weeks, go through your charts. Go in, see, if you do see big spikes like I had on mine, go in and see what triggered those. If it's something that's very rare, like you went out with friends and you had a huge night out drinking, and that's where all the sugar came from, then you're probably okay that way. Some of the big spikes on mine were just that, because generally when I have a drink, I'll mix it with Coke, and there's a lot of sugar in Coke. So that's where that comes from. But find out, what you think is a spot that you feel is going to be a weak point that you're going to be able to work with. And like I say, I'm going to be doing the sodium thing, so I would urge you to do that along with me. Even if it's not a major concern for you, just sort of following along with us and keeping on keeping on. But keeping up with the group, I'll put it that way. I think is going to be much more helpful than at this stage, especially everyone's scattering off and doing their own thing. We will be addressing everything else, and we will get to whatever you feel is your major weak point that you need to work on. It just so happens that for me, I think the sodium right now is probably mine. And probably for a lot of us. If you're overweight, then obviously we need to do everything that we can to help with our heart and our circulation and blood pressure and the myriad of problems that come along with that. Plus, we've been working on the dehydration thing by drinking lots of water and stuff like that. Now that we start, cutting back on the sodium, that's going to help there as well. So overall, I think the sodium thing is probably a good thing to start with. It's something that you can physically measure with the intake of food as well as any extra salt that you've added on there. I'm going to have to start really tracking and measuring the spices I put on food instead of just sort of going free for all. And trying to find something that will give it flavor, but not take away from, there's that salty flavor can still be there. I just don't think that we need to have it as bad as I've been doing it. Whatever. I don't know what happens. I don't know what's going on. Not making sense. I'm starting to babble. So we're going to wrap things up here very quickly before things get really embarrassing. Overall, over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be sort of taking a look at what we can do, and I'll be sharing that with you, obviously, as well. New things that I've found, whether it's, changing to fresher spices and herbs and things like that, or herbs, if you prefer. Just in a way, just that I can sort of cut down on the salt. As I said, I'm not going to be buying any new salt. I have my salt shaker, which is very big, and it's filled with salt. I'm going to try to make that last as long as I possibly can, and really start tracking it. So when I do use salt, I'm going to start measuring that as well. So, but again, that's starting in about 3 weeks' time. On week 20, that's when we'll start doing this. So this gives us plenty of time to go through, get used to your charts, get used to reading those, because we're going to want to keep maintaining those and keep the trends going, so that as you start going through every 3 months, you'll gradually see it start to even out a little bit more. It won't be as spiky, won't be as erratic, and that's the main thing. And I think once we start on week 20, then to set things up and say, all right, we're going to do this month by month, and if your average is okay at the end of the month, then we're on the right track. Then we can start narrowing it down to week by week, because that is going to take a lot more time investment than many of us have right now. But it'll be a little easier, because if you're following it for an entire month, we're already tracking the food, then I think it's going to be, again, baby steps. It's going to be easier for us to start out that way. So those are my 5 charts. Anyway, I guess for lack of a better term, I'll just keep using those. And you can go up to MyFitnessPal. I don't know if you can do it. Yeah, I think you should be able to do it on your phone as well. If you have it on your mobile device, you should be able to go in and take a look if it's on your tablet or your phone or whatever. But you can go on the computer, you can take a look and take screenshots if you want to track it yourself. Whatever you want to do with it, just to have something that you can go back and look at a year from now and say, you know what, this is what I was eating before, and now a year later, things are nice and even and overall. Anyway, you're always going to have spiky days, because every now and then you're going to go out and you're going to want to have fun, and you're not going to need to worry about it. You're not going to want to worry about it, and you're just not going to say, well, I would have more fun, but I have to watch my fat intake. Like, no, screw it. You're allowed to have a day every once in a while. The problem is that every single day was like that for us. But I think we're at a stage now where, although we'll have, we'll take a weekend and say, I'm not going to worry about it this weekend, we are still coming back and continuing on what we're doing. And overall, it's still going to make a big, big, big difference. So, anyway, this was much longer than I thought it was going to be. Half an hour. I'm sorry. But we've learned a lot. I've thrown a lot of information at you. But it's going to give us plenty of time over the next 2 or 3 weeks to go through, get used to those, so that you know that we can start tracking and start our little food tweaks. But I figured 20 weeks is a good milestone to start with. 5 months in, not quite halfway through, but we have 5 different charts to go through over the next 7 months. So I think it's a good way to start it. And we'll just sort of continue on, and we'll probably just go month by month, so that we'll have week 20 will be sodium, and then week 24 would be sodium and sugar, and then sodium, sugar, and fat, and we'll just sort of continue on that way and even things out. But for the meantime, keep doing what we're doing, because we're making progress. Those little changes have helped a great deal. And even now, if you're looking at it, if you had thought 6 months ago, before you started watching these, if you were even aware of your sugar intake or sodium or anything else, and now look at you. You're looking up charts, you're doing math, there's numbers and bars and colors and things and everything all over the place. So bravo, we're doing well. But for now, I'm going to leave this here because I've gone way, way over. Goodbye to the 15 minutes. But yeah, close enough to half an hour, so nailed it. Anyway, for right now, thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please give me please give me a call. Yes, that's what I was going to say. I can't start this over. Now I've made a complete ass of everything, and we can't do this anymore. Sorry, that's it. It's the end of it. No, we're going to start over. Forget that first part that you saw. We'll start from nailed it. So, bam! Nailed it! Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. In the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.